Okay, so get this. You're heading to India,
Oh, wow.
right in the thick of things.
That's exciting.
And we've got a stack of intel here.
Oh,
Financial news, political headlines, even a bit of tech drama.
it's like a lot to unpack.
It is. It is. Think of this deep dive as your insider's guide to what's really going down in India right now.
I like it, an insider's guide.
Yeah.
What's particularly interesting, I think, is how these events might actually intersect with a trip like yours.
Yeah.
Give you kind of a front row seat to the energy of India in 2025.
It's true. And speaking of energy, let's talk about those Delhi elections.
Big day.
It is election day, like as we're recording this.
Uh-huh.
Over 15 million people voting.
That's a huge number.
That's got to be one wild scene.
It's a huge deal, not just for Delhi, but as a pulse check on national politics. You know, the outcome here could really influence the landscape leading up to the next general election.
So it's almost like a mini referendum on the current government.
You could say that, yeah?
And I was reading there's this huge wave of young first-time voters this time around.
Interesting.
That's got to shake things up, right?
It could, yeah. But voter turnout will tell the tale. High participation from younger voters suggests a potential shift in priorities, right? Maybe towards issues like climate change or even digital access.
So for me, as I'm traveling there, like, what should I be paying attention to? What are the things that are going to give me a sense of what's important to the people?
Yeah, good question. I mean, as you're moving around Delhi, pay attention to things like pollution levels or housing.
Right.
Those kind of everyday things that they'll give you a sense of what's really top of mind for the people.
Makes sense. Okay, so from political drama to the economic stage.
Okay.
The Economic Survey 2025.
Right.
This one caught my eye. It hints at some potential storm clouds for India's economy,
Yeah.
even though things seem pretty good overall, right?
Right. Well, the survey raises concerns about a potential U.S. market correction impacting India. Specifically, it points to anxieties around U.S. trade policies and the possibility of a domino effect on investor confidence.
So wait, even though India is doing well, it's still super tied to the U.S. market's ups and downs.
Yeah, welcome to globalization, right? It's an interconnected world, and India's no exception. The survey also flags a potential risk with all these new investors that have jumped in post-pandemic. Many of them might not be ready for a bumpy ride if things go south.
So a bit of foreshadowing, maybe.
Perhaps.
Speaking of bumpy rides, the Nifty index took a dip this morning, didn't it?
It did open down 0.5%, and those U.S. market jitters that we were just talking about are definitely playing a role.
Makes sense. But I also noticed that some sectors within the Nifty actually rallied today.
Interesting.
Yeah, consumer durables, finance. What's the story there? Is that just classic buy low mentality or something more?
It's a mix of both, I think. This is market psychology at its finest. Fear is driving some investors away, while others are seeing those dips as an opportunity to grab bargains. The sectors that you mentioned, those are often considered more resilient, indicating underlying strength in specific parts of the Indian economy. The afternoon recovery is encouraging, but I'd say keep an eye on those support and resistance levels. Specifically around the 18,000 mark for the Nifty, that'll give you a better sense of where things might be headed.
So it's a bit of a tug of war then.
Exactly.
Bulls versus bears, global anxieties versus local resilience.
Yeah, and how that tug of war plays out could have real implications, not just for investors, but for the everyday lives of people in India.
Absolutely. Okay, now for something a little less market-moving but still impactful, Power Grid Corporation, the folks who keep the lights on in India, their profits took a hit.
This one's a bit of the canary in the coal mine, I think. It speaks to the larger infrastructure challenges that India is facing. As the economy grows, energy demands are skyrocketing. Keeping up with that demand while also trying to ensure a reliable power supply, it's a constant balancing act.
But they did announce a dividend, which seems pretty optimistic considering the profit dip.
That's a key takeaway, I think. The dividend signals confidence to investors, showing that they're committed to shareholder value despite these challenges. It suggests that they view this profit dip as a bump in the road, not a derailment.
Good news. Okay, so from electricity to, well, the air itself.
Oh boy.
The Supreme Court is stepping into the ring with the whole stubble burning issue.
Ah, yes.
It sounds pretty intense.
It can be. You have to imagine Delhi, right?
Yeah.
A mega city shrouded in thick smoke for weeks on end. It's a major health hazard. And the Supreme Court is really trying to force some action here.
I mean, this sounds like a tough nut to crack. Is this something that I, as a visitor, might encounter firsthand while I'm there?
It's definitely something to be aware of, especially if you're traveling during or right after the harvest season. The air quality can be significantly impacted, so pay attention to local advisories. And Consider packing a good quality face mask.
Good advice. Okay, now on a brighter note, there's talk of some tax breaks coming down the pipeline,
Oh,
potentially putting more money in everyone's pockets.
yes. The government's proposing income tax and TDS relief in the upcoming budget. The goal here is to encourage people to spend or invest more, boosting the economy through that multiplier effect that we talked about earlier.
That all sounds good on paper, but I gotta ask, is it realistic? Do people really change their spending habits that much based on a tax break?
That's the million rupee question, right?
Yeah.
The government's betting on it. It's gamble for sure, but it's based on the idea that even a small increase in disposable income can have a ripple effect throughout the economy, especially when you consider the sheer size of India's population.
Okay, so fingers crossed that people actually hit the shops instead of stashing that cash under their mattresses. Exactly. We'll be watching closely to see how this plays out and whether it has the intended impact.
All right, let's shift gears now to something a bit more serious.
Okay.
The situation in Manipur. There's been ongoing violence, and it sounds like things are pretty tense.
This is a complex issue with a long history. The Supreme Court is now really digging for the truth here, seeking audio evidence that could shed light on the violence and identify those responsible for either inciting it or escalating it.
So it's almost a bit of a whodunit then,
In a way,
with the Supreme Court playing detective.
it's a developing story for sure. And the findings of this investigation could have major implications for the region, especially in terms of accountability and justice.
Now, from India to the global tech scene,
Okay.
it seems even OpenAI, the big name in AI, is feeling the heat with the rise of a rival called DeepSeek.
Fascinating. This is a real clash of philosophies in the world of AI. DeepSeek's open source model is gaining traction and it's shaking things up. So it's more than just another tech company popping up. It's a whole different way of thinking about how AI should be developed.
Precisely. OpenAI has been more controlled, walled garden approach. DeepSeek, on the other hand, is all about transparency, allowing developers to access and modify their code. It's a more democratic approach, and it's resonating, especially in a country like India with its booming tech scene.
Okay, so two very different visions for the future of AI. Is this something I might encounter during my trip?
Absolutely. Keep an eye out for startups and tech companies, especially in the hubs like Bangalore and Hyderabad. You might even stumble upon events or conferences where they're discussing this very topic.
All right, time for something a little lighter to finish up this part of our deep dive.
Okay.
India just crushed England in cricket, and the whole country's buzzing about it.
Cricket. It's more than just a game in India. It's a national obsession. And this victory, let's just say, it's given everyone bragging rights for a while.
I heard Abhishek Sharma had an absolute blinder of a match.
He was on fire.
Smashing sixes left and right, totally demoralizing the English side.
A performance for the ages. The energy in the stadium must have been electric. If you get the chance to catch even a local match while you're there, you'll get a first-hand taste of this passion. It's truly contagious.
That's awesome. All right, that's a wrap for part one of our India deep dive.
Okay.
We've covered everything from elections and markets to AI showdowns and cricket triumphs.
It's been a whirlwind.
It has. We've barely scratched the surface, though. Stay tuned for part two, where we'll unpack even more insights and connect them directly to your upcoming journey.
Can't wait.
All right, we're back for round two of our India deep dive. Ready to uncover some more insights that'll give you an edge on your trip?
Absolutely. Let's pick up where we left off with those potential tax breaks and the whole idea of a multiplier effect. I know you had some questions about whether it actually works in practice.
Yeah, I mean, it's a nice thought. The government cuts taxes, people spend more, the economy gets a boost. But does it actually play out that way, or do people just end up saving that extra cash?
It's a valid question, and there's no easy answer. The multiplier effect is a powerful concept in economics. But its effectiveness really depends on a whole bunch of factors, including things like consumer confidence, overall economic conditions, and even social trends.
So it's not like a guaranteed slam dunk then?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Think of it like this. You throw a pebble into a pond, and the ripples spread out. The size of those ripples depends on the size of the pebble and how still the water is.
Okay.
In this case, the pebble is the tax break, and the water is the Indian economy. The government's hoping for a big splash, but it's too early to say how far those ripples will actually reach.
Okay, I like that analogy. It makes it a bit easier to picture the whole thing in action. Now let's jump back to something we touched on earlier, the situation in Manipur and the Supreme Court's investigation into the violence. It sounds like there are a lot of layers to this story.
It's a very sensitive situation, and the Supreme Court is taking a very active role, which is significant. They're demanding answers, seeking audio evidence, that could reveal what really happened and who might be responsible for either inciting the conflict or escalating it.
It sounds like they're treating this very serious, digging deep to get to the truth.
They are. This isn't just about punishing those responsible. It's also about understanding the underlying causes of the conflict, addressing those root issues, and hopefully preventing future outbreaks of
So
violence.
it's about justice, but also about long-term peace and stability.
Exactly. It's a complex and challenging task, but the Supreme Court's involvement sends a very strong message that they're committed to finding solutions.
All right, now let's switch gears again from law and order to the world of innovation. We were talking about DeepSeek, the open source AI platform that's shaking things up. You mentioned that India is playing a key role in this movement. Can you give me some concrete examples of what that looks like on the ground?
Absolutely. One area where DeepSeek is making waves is in healthcare. Indian startups are using it to develop AI-powered diagnostic tools that can detect diseases like tuberculosis and malaria at very early stages, even in remote areas with limited access to healthcare facilities.
Wow. So it's not just about making cool tech, it's about using that tech to solve real-world problems and improve people's lives.
Exactly. Another fascinating example is in agriculture. DeepSeek is being used to create AI models that can analyze soil conditions, weather patterns, and crop health to help farmers optimize their yields and reduce water usage, which is crucial in a country like India, where agriculture is a vital part of the economy and where water scarcity is a growing concern.
So DeepSeek is empowering Indian innovators to tackle some of the country's biggest challenges. That's pretty inspiring.
It is. And this open source approach is creating a ripple effect, fostering collaboration and knowledge sharing within the tech community. It's democratizing access to powerful AI tools and enabling a whole new generation of Indian entrepreneurs to make a real impact.
That's incredible. Okay, before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, let's circle back to those Delhi elections. They're happening as we speak, and the results could have a ripple effect across the country. What are the key things our listeners should keep an eye on as those results come in?
First and foremost, voter turnout. We talked about that surge in young first-time voters. If they show up in force, it could signal a real shift in political priorities and a desire for change.
So high voter turnout, especially among the younger generation, could be a sign of things to come on the national stage.
Exactly. Another key indicator is the performance of the major parties. Will the incumbent Aam Aadmi Party hold on to power, or will the Bharatiya Janata Party make a comeback?
And what about the Congress Party? Can they regain some of their lost ground?
It sounds like there's a lot at stake. It's not just about who wins in Delhi. It's about what that win might say about the mood of the nation. Precisely. And finally, pay attention to the issues that dominated the campaign. What resonated most with voters? Was it economic growth, social welfare, environmental concerns, or perhaps a combination of all those factors? The answers to these questions will provide valuable insights into the direction that India might be headed in the coming years.
Okay, so voter turnout, party performance, and key issues. Those are the things to watch as the results unfold. It's like a real-time political drama, and we have front row seats.
We do. And as those results come in, we'll break it all down for you, connecting the dots and offering a deeper understanding of what it all means. But for now, let's take a quick breather, and then we'll come back for the final part of our India deep dive, where we'll wrap things up with some key takeaways and final thoughts for our listener.
And we're back for the final part of our India deep dive. Feels like we've been on quite a journey.
We have. We really have. From market jitters and AI breakthroughs to political showdowns and even some thrilling cricket.
I feel like I've gotten a crash course in all things India.
It has been a whirlwind tour of current events.
So as we wrap things up, what are the big takeaways? What should our listener really keep in mind as they get ready to experience India firsthand?
One thing that's been a constant theme throughout our deep dive is this incredible sense of dynamism. India is a country in constant flux, a vibrant mix of ancient traditions and modern aspirations.
And you'll feel that energy everywhere you go.
Everywhere. It's like this blend of old and new.
You see it in the architecture, the
Even
technology.
in the way people interact with each other.
Exactly. And that dynamism creates a unique kind of tension, right?
It does.
A tension between tradition and progress, between global forces and local identities.
And it's this tension that makes India so fascinating, so unpredictable, and ultimately so rewarding to experience.
So it's not always going to be easy, right? There'll be challenges, frustrations, maybe even a few culture shocks along the way.
That's part of the adventure.
Exactly. Embrace the chaos, the contradictions.
Even the occasional discomfort.
That's where the real magic lies.
In those moments when you step outside of your comfort zone and allow yourself to be, surprised, Challenged?
and ultimately transformed by the experience.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a great overarching takeaway. Embrace the dynamism, expect the unexpected. But what about some more practical tips, especially for someone who's maybe a bit apprehensive about navigating a country as vast and complex as India?
Sure. One thing I always recommend is do your research, but also be prepared to, throw out the itinerary
Yeah.
and just go with the flow. Talk to people. Ask for recommendations, and don't be afraid to get lost. Some of the most memorable experiences happen when you wander off the beaten path.
I love that getting lost in India, both literally and figuratively.
Exactly.
Now, we talked about the markets being a bit of a roller coaster right now.
Yeah.
Any advice for our listener who might be thinking about investments or just trying to make sense of the economic landscape?
Well, keep a close eye on those support and resistance levels that we talked about earlier. If the Nifty holds above that 18,000 mark, it could signal a continued upward trend.
Okay.
But if it breaks below, we could see some further dips. Volatility is part of the game, especially in emerging markets.
So stay informed, don't panic, and maybe have a backup plan in case things get a bit turbulent.
Exactly. And remember, India's long-term growth story remains very strong, even with these short-term bumps in the road. The key is to have a diversified portfolio and a long-term perspective.
All right. And one last thing before we let our listener go. We talked about those Delhi elections and the Supreme Court's investigation into the Manipur violence. These are serious issues, and they might be playing out in the background during your trip. What's your advice for navigating these potentially sensitive situations?
Stay informed, follow the news, talk to locals, get a sense of the situation on the ground, but also be respectful. Avoid discussing politics or sensitive issues unless you're in a trusted environment. And if you encounter any protests or demonstrations, observe from a safe distance.
So it's about being aware, being sensitive, and using common sense.
Exactly. India is a land of contrasts, and you'll encounter a wide range of perspectives and opinions. Listen, learn, engage respectfully, but remember, you're a guest in this country.
Okay, so there you have it. Your India deep dive, complete with insights, tips, and a whole lot of encouragement to embrace the adventure that awaits. As you embark on this incredible journey, remember to be open, curious, and respectful. India is a country that will challenge, inspire, and ultimately transform you in ways you never imagined.
And remember, what we've covered here is really just the tip of the iceberg. Each of these stories is a gateway to a deeper understanding of India's complexities and its immense potential. Enjoy the ride and keep exploring.